Thank you, Patrick. I'm Graham Cross from Chiltern Railways. I was the promoter of the Transport and Works Act order for the Bicester to Oxford section of the upgrade. The inquiry for that actually opened pretty well 5 years ago this month, and here we are, we're now at the halfway through the construction phase. I was struck by Andy's slide, which pointed out that actually there were a number of issues with consents and powers for phase 2, which would need a Transport and Works Act order to resolve. And what I'm interested in really is what strategy are you planning to adopt to make sure that the Transport and Works Act order for that section of line gets a smoother run than the one which I promoted?
Very good question, Graham. Yeah, I think I mentioned the Planning Ahead initiative, where we're actively working with all the local authorities, that's the planning authorities and the highway authorities and the right-of-way authorities, to understand the level of consents we need. We are looking to use our existing powers where we can to get ahead of the game. Hence the trial or the pilot scheme to close 6 crossings in Swanbourne. We're looking to submit that to the right-of-way officers formally in January of next year, so just 2 months away. So we've got a lot of goodwill with the local authorities already, and also we've so far held 3 roadshows across the route, working from Milton Keynes towards Bicester to start with, and the actual level of support from the ordinary person in the street, if you like, is really quite surprised me. It's been really positive. So I'm hoping that with the communications we're doing at the moment, that also brings people on side.
My question, though, is about the Atkins report that came out in the summer, because I was very concerned that Milton Keynes didn't feature in any of the priority journey pairs that were identified in that study. And so I'm a bit worried that when it comes to Network Rail looking at all these corridors and options, that Milton Keynes Central, that is, the city centre, won't be on that corridor. Can you give me any sort of reassurance that despite the fact that Milton Keynes didn't appear in those journey pairs, it's still actually under consideration, because it is the biggest settlement on the entire route?
Graham, I know we'd commissioned the Atkins report, but did you want to...
You wanted to answer the question about the Atkins report before I... I mean, I can answer it purely... I mean, we are using the... I mean, the whole reason for doing the piece of work to generate the economic evidence was to use the evidence to drive where the services should go. So it is the services in the high and the very high priority pairs that we are using to drive the potential routings, because it's those that the economics say have got the value. Does that mean that when we come to look at the precise ways of delivering that, other opportunities aren't there? No, it doesn't. There's clearly lots of other opportunities that come on the back of hitting the key journey opportunities. And that's the piece of work that we've got to go through. I don't know whether you want to answer about the...
Well, only in as much as, in terms of the journey pairs, you're quite right, Milton Keynes wasn't featured, but in terms of the corridors that we're looking at, Milton Keynes is very much featured. So, and Graham did indicate that the corridors are pretty broad, and they are at the moment. But to reassure you, I cannot envisage Milton Keynes being left out of the missing link equation, if you like.
Hello, I'm Phil Marsh from rail.co.uk and the Railway magazine. I've spoken to Ian a few times about an interchange station at Steeple Claydon, which I see is now being looked at. Because I also do a lot of rail operation consultancy, so 2 hats. But if you've got the runoffs to the IMD from HS2 and you've got the East-West link, it seems to me a station would benefit the local area, which I don't live far from.
In terms of a station at Steeple Claydon on the East-West rail route, we have asked Network Rail to safeguard a station. Yeah. So we're not proposing to build a station there, but one is safeguarded in the event that a case was made for it. And indeed, I think I'm correct in saying that Buckinghamshire are got a plan to, as part of mitigation to HS2, is to have a station built at Steeple Claydon. But at this stage, we're just safeguarding a location. You want to add anything, Andy?
Yeah, that's right. When we design track signalling, all the infrastructure will be designed with a possible station in mind. Yeah.
Good.
Chair Richard Crane, Bedford Bletchley Rail Users Group. It's really I want to follow on quickly really from Alan's question about Milton Keynes. Again, looking at the pairings that you're looking at, I am increasingly concerned that Bedford could well be overlooked. It doesn't seem to fit in with many of the options you're looking at. My question is though, if the eventual line of route for the central section was either to omit Milton Keynes or Bedford, would that phase 1 service that is promised to serve Oxford, Milton Keynes and Bedford, will that continue? Is that set in stone, or would that become vulnerable if a different route was chosen to reach Cambridge?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
I think in truth it's too early really to answer, because I think there are a number of things. I mean, there are a huge number of ifs, buts, and maybes about the actual routing of the central section. Never mind if we choose a particular route, what happens to the existing service. I just think it's far too early to even sort of get my head round, to be honest.
It is too early to say. But I mean, one of the issues was two things really. To get out of Bedford Midland on the old alignment is pretty nigh impossible. But obviously, you know, that hasn't been dismissed yet because we haven't got there. But there's also the potential for parkway stations in that area that could potentially serve Bedford. But that's a bit of a cop-out because, quite honestly, Richard, we can't answer your question. But take on board your concerns is all I can say at the moment.
Thanks very much. It's Graham Newman, Suffolk County Council, Councillor for Roads, Transport and Planning. Dr. Lim mentioned in her talk about the potential of linking into the East Coast ports over this. And just to sort of, and I looked at your map as well. I mean, your map had nothing east of the A1 I could see. The thing is this, that Network Rail are already gearing up to increase the number of freight trains out of Felixstowe from 30 a day to 48 a day and then to 60 a day. And it just seems to me a huge potential source of business to this prospect of the central section could be within what Port of Felixstowe could bring to you. It still remains the largest port in the country, and our competitors are there and about, but not making huge inroads at the moment to a very significant freight movement each year.
Can I just say something about that? The map was only for illustrative purposes to locate Semler, but I did mention Felixstowe, and I think just to take that further, one of the things we could really try and do is to get the LEPs to work together. The New Anglia LEP would be involved as well, to really press for the case to do what is needed on that the central and eastern sections. That it's a good time to get them really involved and to really get the point about how the connection with those ports is really, really critical and the benefits that brings.
And certainly in terms of the corridors we're looking at, freight is very much relevant.
Very, very, very critical to our wider network planning is the sheer moving the scale of intermodal boxes out of the whole Felixstowe complex. One of the things we will do as we look at this is we'll look at the use of the different potential routings for movement of freight to elsewhere in the country, and potentially identify other enhancements that we might have had to do somewhere else, that by building an East-West Rail Central section and using it for freight, we may not need to do, to actually further demonstrate the case for this piece of railway.
I'm Joan Hancock from Hertfordshire LEP. I wanted to ask Graham, just if he could give a bit more detail on the timescales of phases 2A, 2B and 2C. You gave the overall timescale, but I just wondered if there was more detail on the individual phases.
We're busy working up just what that detail does do, and a lot depends on how the piece of work that I referenced comes down to reducing the number of routes. So a lot depends on that, and a lot depends on just how much funding's likely to be available for this sort of stuff to see this thing through. But our big target is for that funding round, for that funding cycle for 2019 to 2024.